really, there are a lot of very interesting things that happen when you are in a developing country that has the money to really develop.
Welcome to Alt Investing Made Easy, where we explore the complex world of alternative assets. I'm Roland, a securities attorney, investment advisor, and your co-host.
And I'm Sarah, an investment advisor and corporate attorney, and your other co-host. We'll guide you through real estate, private equity, and more, making complex topics accessible.
Tune in for insights that empower your financial journey.
Let's make alt investing easy, one episode at a time.
Welcome, everyone, to Alt Investing Made Easy. We're switching roles a little bit today. I'm starting out because we're going to be having a very special guest on today. It's our co-host, Sarah Florer. We're going to talk today about her background working in Dubai. She spent 17 years there, right, Sarah?
Yeah, actually, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, so just extensive experience. And Dubai has a place of fascination, I think, in the United States, probably just because it's associated with so much money and, you know, the tall building there, Burj Al Khalifa, right? Did I get that right?
Burj Khalifa. Burj Khalifa. The other one that's famous is Burj Al Arab. That's not quite so tall, but it's very iconic. It's shaped like a sail, and it's used in a lot of advertisements about Dubai. So that one's the Al.
Okay,
Arab.
So I was wanting to
we can nitpick it.
extra word in there, but in any event, so you know, this is such an interesting part about you, Sarah. When I first met you, I was fascinated by it, and so let's dive into it. You are an American trained attorney. You went to UT, University of Texas Law School in Austin, but then tell us kind of how you wound up practicing law in Dubai.
Well, it's kind of a direct story and a roundabout story. I actually didn't go straight from university the first time into law school like some people do. I worked in, I guess you could say, different parts of a finance team inside a big corporate, and then essentially worked in a big private company supporting the board with various activities, whether they were assistant-oriented or sort of analyst-oriented. And that lasted for a while. And then I ended up managing assets for a social services company, and I met really interesting attorneys that way and decided to go to law school. At the same time, I have a unique background, I guess, in that my parents were expats in North Africa in the 1970s. And I was ultimately born in Canada, not in Algeria where they lived. But as a result of those experiences for them, when I was growing up primarily in the United States, we always had a lot of things from North Africa, carpets on the walls, and things from the region, which is known as the MENA, Middle East and North Africa. And we also, I was aware of Islam and different, I learned a lot about different religions and that kind of thing. So I kind of had this natural open-mindedness or interest in the region. And then, so when I came back to law school in early 2000, I actually also pursued a master's in Middle Eastern studies. Now, ultimately, I didn't finish that for various reasons. One being that it was going to take 2 more years, and I was already done at 3 years with law school. But I did take a lot of classes, learned a lot. And then my husband and I ended up moving to Dubai in 2007. He is from India. He's an Indian national also, and an attorney. So Dubai is a major port. So that was also a reason for him. He started working for a very large English law firm in Dubai, and I started working for the largest regional law firm in the Middle East, based in Dubai, called Al-Tamimi and Company. And so that's how we got started in 2007 in the United Arab Emirates. And we stayed there. I'm still a resident in the UAE, actually. I still have some business that I do there. My husband actually also has a business. He's an attorney. He has a law firm that he runs with some other people. And so we have this life where we live between 2 countries in a sense. But as a result of all of this, this is the very big summary story. I actually have had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of really interesting things with my legal career.
Yeah, so maybe start out. You said you worked at a large law firm at first. Maybe
Right.
tell us about
So
that.
that was a great experience because I started in the banking and finance department, and this particular law firm was founded by a person who was very well connected into the ruling elites. And as a result, the managing partner, who was a different person from that, he was also a founder. He had a lot of really interesting clients. So I started off in the banking and finance team and ended up doing a lot of work on the Islamic and conventional financing side for banks and big syndicated financing deals, all kinds of stuff, really, even retail work. And then also was doing corporate finance because there was a nascent public stock exchange, and there are these financial free zones in the region that were just getting started. And really, there are a lot of very interesting things that happen when you are in a developing country that has the money to really develop. And that is, I think, fair to say about the United Arab Emirates. So, so that was, and then because of the status of the founders of the firm, we ended up having a lot of really interesting VVIP clients. So I ended up in a doing a lot of private wealth type work because in a country like Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, or also just generally in lots of countries, the people who found companies that go public are the same ones who invest in big private deals, or the same ones who have big private family deals, who ultimately run their businesses almost like what we might call a big private family office. There's a lot of intersections with all of the parts of doing work for corporates or banks, with individuals who are actually the owners of those banks who also have companies that they found in construction. I mean, there are a lot of overlaps, I guess you could say. And putting aside question marks about that, it's natural I mean, the UAE still is only 12 million population. It's basically the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, I think, as I understand it. So it's natural that there'd be a lot of overlap with the people who have the money. So yeah, I worked in that law firm for a good 4 years, and then a client of the firm asked me to come in-house with them, and that client was a private equity arm, you could say, of the private investment arm of the ruler of Dubai. And that there's, for people who know about the United Arab Emirates, there's a term that was circulated in those days called Dubai Inc. And what Dubai Inc. is the large corporate structure that is both the government and the private entity wealth, private activities of the rulers of the country or of that particular emirate. And so I essentially worked for a part of Dubai Inc. It's quite complex and arguably opaque, but also it is a country that is composed of 7 little micro states that are their own monarchies. So that's the way their structure works. And it was really interesting. And I went from that I was there for a few years, and then they asked me to go down and be the general counsel at one of their asset companies, which is a telecommunications company that had been locally founded in Dubai and had a regional presence across India and parts of Africa and all over the GCC, which is what the Gulf Cooperation Council, it includes Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain and Oman. So that was basically what I did in Dubai. And in the process, I got to really work on a lot of really interesting deals, raising money, big lending transactions. And then from the perspective of private equity, where you're investing in telecommunications assets around the world and managing those assets, managing a lot of governance, and then moving forward into actually an operational company. So it was rewarding, and I'm really grateful for having had the experience.
Yeah, sir. And I think one of the things, keeping the population in perspective, it's interesting, a nation of 12 million people, but then some of the deals that you worked on are some of the largest, in for sure private, but as well the public. So maybe tell us a little bit about the deals that you worked on and the size of those deals.
Well, an interesting feature of I guess being willing to spend your career, part of your career in an emerging market like the United Arab Emirates, is that you get to, from a very early time in your career, you get to work on really big deals, essentially, especially in my case, because I'd already worked for a while. I was, all my work skills, my people skills, my management skills were really, project management skills were really, really strong. So I jumped into like leading or managing deals that were pretty large, even when I was a fairly young attorney, in the sense of how we measure that as attorneys with is basically years of experience. So I think, it was very common to have a few $100 million in a syndicated financing deal that you're working on, also up to the billions that you could work on. Part of the reason for that is that there was a huge amount of infrastructure development going on, including developing proprietary satellites for the country and military installations, and of course, oil and gas funding. I mean, the funding for infrastructure for oil and gas, which of course it's not Dubai that has the majority of the oil wealth of United Arab Emirates. It's Abu Dhabi, which is also the emirate that's in charge of the country as a whole. That's really where the oil money sits. But as a result, and of course, the Dubai skyline is famous. I think the time that we moved, the famous story about Dubai in 2007 was that something like 60% of the world's cranes were deployed and employed in Dubai building buildings. And that was absolutely true. You could drive around on all these roads that were also being constructed and see all of this. And then, construction would go really quickly, and there are reasons for that. There are question marks about some of the safety sometimes, but a lot of that was getting cleaned up by the late 2000s. Of course, country being small could make fast and quick decisions about safety regulations and whatnot, and they did ultimately come on board with a lot of it. And so it was a really interesting time to be there. You could literally see the government's money being spent everywhere. But for lawyers in the background, I mean, just because it's government money doesn't mean that it's not all subject to a lot of negotiations, a lot of deals, documentation, all the work that we attorneys do, supporting on, of course, there'd be RFPs, but also different private parties that were doing all of these projects, working closely with the government in these private public deals, which are kind of a movement. It's called PPP, I think. And so, it was a really fun time to be involved in things. Every day there was something new and large, I guess. And ultimately, I think the largest deal that I got to work on, where I really kind of directed our team, was close to $1 billion. And that was in 2010. And I think today those deals are probably much bigger, maybe $5 or $6 billion. I don't really know.
Well, I mean, they're deals of the largest size for sure for the time. That was a huge deal, and it still is nowadays. So having that perspective is really worthwhile, worth noting that you do have that experience in working with people at the highest level of industry and government in these massive infrastructure deals that were really, hand in hand with the overall development, probably the United States perception of Dubai. It was just kind of all of that is occurring. I know you've said before that they have great marketing, right?
They really do.
And that's one of the reasons why it's so popular here in the United States.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're going to talk about that in a minute, the perception that there's so much wealth there that people are willing to easily give it to you. That's maybe a misperception. But for sure, the government, it's interesting because the country of the United Arab Emirates was formed by and really brought together these 7 emirates by a man named Sheikh Zayed. And he is an iconic figure in the region because he was very forward thinking about what to do to take care of the people from the country and how to develop to be part of the modern world. And I think it's fair to say the country's only 50 years or so since 1972, 53 years old, 54. National Day is coming up at the beginning of December. And they've really made great strides in many, many ways. And some of that has been because on the balance, there have been a lot of really good investments and in the country, in the infrastructure, in its place as a financial hub for the Middle East. The Middle East is grossly underserved when it comes to some of the very basic telecommunications assets that we all take for granted. Historically, there was no hub. Dubai is a hub. The United Arab Emirates has sea cables that come and connect the UAE to the rest of the world, and then also connect throughout the Middle East itself. Other countries which have even less access to all of this modern global infrastructure that a lot of us take for granted. So I think, there are some stories of excess, crazy projects, and that's still part of sort of the culture of the region, which there's a certain competitiveness and putting out that there's going to be an even taller building than the Burj Khalifa or an even bigger project, and then it ultimately doesn't come fully to pass in the format it was advertised. But at the same time, it's okay. There's a lot of really standard basic infrastructure that's really there. The roads in Dubai, it's quite funny. The roads are great to drive on, except for the way they're planned, which you can really burn up a lot of extra miles by accident if you take a wrong turn. But the roads themselves are excellent. And, it's a great place to drive supercars, which a lot of people drive supercars in the United Arab Emirates. It's unlike Austin, where you would, when I see people in a Lamborghini, I think, God, I can't even imagine what the roads here are doing to your suspension. So, and there's certain stereotypes that are true. Like, it's definitely true that there are a lot of supercars on the road, so much so that you just ignore them. Like, it's just another one. Or it's something like, oh, I've never seen a bright purple Lamborghini. It's something that's so customized that it catches your eye, not because it's a supercar, but because it's a super customized one. And there are various reasons that we could get into for why some of that is, but I think the flavor for today, Roland, if you want, we could talk about capital raising a little bit, which might be interesting to people to understand a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one thing that I've observed is that people come to you for questions and say, "Hey, Sarah, what would it be like for me to go to Dubai and raise money for my deal here in the U.S.?"
Well, and it's a great question because there are definitely a lot of investors, people who would be interested in making money off, for example, U.S.-based real estate. That said, you have to go about it in a way that's legitimate. You can't just turn up and meet some person and be told, yeah, for sure, I'll give you $1 million, and then have that actually happen. Somebody might say that to you. There's a thing in Asia and Middle Eastern culture where people don't like to say no because they don't want to disappoint people. So you'll get a lot of yes, and it's not really real yes. It's inshallah yes. It's a maybe yes. And sometimes people from abroad who go and take yes as a person's word, and then yes doesn't turn out to be a real yes, can feel like a lot of wasted time. But those are legitimate cultural differences. This is also very common in parts of Asia, not just the Middle East, but it is something that can be really frustrating for Americans because you feel strung along, really. But one major thing I want to say for people to understand, because I think this can sometimes be surprising, and that is that, every country has its own laws. So American laws apply in the physical boundaries of the United States and also in certain cases abroad, because we like to do extraterritorial things here in the United States, and we use the prevalence and strength of our US dollar as a way to enforce that around the world. Not every country has that ability to force their laws on other people from other countries. US is kind of unique, and because of that, I think people forget that maybe American law is, not the way things are done elsewhere. And it's not just Americans that do that. People from a lot of countries who come to Dubai, for example, sometimes spend time thinking, well, why do they do it this way? This is wrong. This is not how it should be. This is not how it is in my country. And that's true. It probably isn't. But the important thing to remember is that, of course, the United Arab Emirates has its own laws. And they're actually a little bit complex when it comes to capital raising, because within the United Arab Emirates, you have the federal government, and you have federal regulators like the central bank and the securities. It's called ESCA. It's changed names recently, or anyway, it's the securities regulator for the federal, for the country as a whole. But then you have these carve-outs, and they're called financial free zones. And one of them is the Dubai International Financial Center, and another one is the Abu Dhabi Global Market, ADGM. And there's even a couple of others. One is called VARA, that's for crypto in Dubai. Another one's called the DMCC, that's for commodities regulation in Dubai. It may be closely monitored by ESCA, that one. So nothing is super straightforward. And you have, in these two financial free zones, they have their own laws and regulations, and they pass out their own licensing for financial institutions and regulated financial activities. And you pay for all of this. And there are limitations on where you can actually go physically and how you go about raising money in these particular little jurisdictions. They're like little mini territories within the country. And the reason for that is that the local laws are based on the historical UAE laws, which have a certain history that's common to the MENA. But English law is the basic source origin of DIFC law and of ADGM law. And the ADGM and DIFC also have their own courts applying their own laws. So they're more modern and maybe more suited for international business and for doing business at a grand scale. Also, you can have 100% ownership of your companies in these free zones. And that's a whole other foreign topic to many Americans, is the concept that you can't just come and set up a company in this country without restrictions. And within the UAE, there are restrictions. Historically, you could not just set up a company onshore without having a local partner. That's changed over time, but in the end, these free zones were formed essentially so that foreign companies and foreign people could have 100% ownership of their companies. So then all of this is to say that when it comes to capital raising, there's kind of a quiet system, and then there's the official system. So if you want to be officially regulated, and it's not that different from here, where if you're out there advertising, or if you are making deals and connecting parties, you may need some kind of licensing. You may need to be go through the process to be a broker-dealer. You may need to be an investment advisor. You may need to be a bank, a chartered bank. And the way those activities are identified and license are given for those in each of the free zones is fairly clear. Actually, the regulations are updated quite frequently, and you can navigate that process. Whether you'll ultimately get a banking license or not is often political now, because the markets are pretty saturated. But that doesn't, that leaves aside sort of the gray area of what people do. And then also onshore, it's a similar type of situation. There's a third set of laws. And so you have to navigate all of this if you want to go raise capital from at a grand scale. Let's say if you want to advertise, this would be the main point, when you need to be licensed and regulated and probably have a presence in the UAE in the form of a corporate entity. And then there are different requirements that come with that. And the main thing that comes with all of that is expense. So then the question is, well, how do you go about and raise money quietly? And I'm not going to say a lot about that, because it's not official advice about anything. And of course, this is not legal advice for anyone. But for sure, people go and find a way to talk to their friends, have one-on-one meetings, and ultimately raise capital. But I think probably the fair dividing point is the minute you go public, if you want to go do a road show, invite people to an event where you make a presentation about an opportunity to invest in the United States, that's pushing it into territory where that might be a regulated activity. If you're going to have coffees with people that you've reached out to from abroad and established a personal relationship with, and you go and you have a coffee and you talk about an investment opportunity, that's kind of a coffee shop deal, and oftentimes all of the paperwork for that will be executed outside the country. So that flies a little bit under the radar. That said, This behavior is well known to all the various regulators in the country, and to provide legal advice about all of this, which I can definitely do. I think this is likely changed from the general position from 15 years ago. So.
Well, it's worthwhile noting that you and I are Texas attorneys, and you're licensed in a couple other jurisdictions as well. You're not licensed to practice law in the UAE because they have specific residency and other. Well, yeah, maybe I should
Let me
just ask
explain
you
that.
just to confirm. Yeah, you're not or are you licensed to practice in the UAE?
Yeah, I understand. So what's interesting about the UAE is that if you're going to appear in court, you actually have to be a local Emirati. It used to be open to a person from Arabic-speaking countries, but all of the court procedures are in Arabic onshore. In the DIFC, it's different. The DIFC courts are designed so that foreign attorneys can come, kind of like we go state to state here. You can make an appearance in DIFC court if you're from abroad. So the first requirement, though, to practice law in the UAE, apart from if you're going to do advocacy work, which is court work, is that you have to be licensed in the country you come from or somewhere. So my whole time practicing law in the UAE, I was considered a legal consultant. And the reason I was considered a legal consultant is because I was already licensed in New York at that point. And then a little bit later, I became licensed as an English solicitor. So I was able to work as a legal consultant because I was licensed. And this is the reason I emphasize this is I've spoke to many a young graduating law student who wants to go to the Middle East. And I'm like, no, you got to finish you got to get, sit your bar exam, get your license. Better to get a couple of years experience before you go abroad, because you will not be able to become licensed in the United Arab Emirates. Probably not at all. Now, maybe you may meet one person who found a way, but at the same time, officially, no. So, and also I would add that one reason I became an English solicitor is because definitely English law is much more common in cross-border and international transactions. There are a number of really good reasons for that. One of them is that foreign parties, to the extent they possibly can, avoid the United States because of the expensive litigation that we have. Primarily, that's related to our discovery rules, which are viewed as excessive by many in the rest of the world. But in any event, it's only when you have to that you end up with American law. And another problem is, what is American law? New York law governed documents, maybe. Nobody likes California law governed documents, but these are generalizations. But this is one reason why English qualified attorneys and English law itself is used widely abroad and in cross-border transactions, and that is because, quite frankly, it's a little bit more straightforward. You can actually research it in one place, and it's just cultivated actually to be. I think it was a direct strategy of the British, the UK government to make English law important in the international context. So, and not to mention the Commonwealth and all of that too. So, the former empire, I should say. So anyway, that leads to when you practice law in the UAE. So, for example, now I do not. Well, actually, I probably I can. Well, here's how I could put it. I can find answers about UAE law problems. And then if an official legal opinion is needed, then I have resources with law firms who can issue those kinds of official opinions.
And so it would be a UAE law firm.
Yeah.
Probably it sounds like more the advocacy work. There's maybe more stringent requirements on that. And then some of these free zones, they're more flexible rules. And
when I say advocacy work, I mean onshore. So we're talking about the courts, the federal courts and the state courts equivalent. When you talk about the DIFC and the ADGM, there are different rules that apply. The overall regulation of lawyers happens each federally in each emirate to emirate. So it's actually, what's interesting about the United Arab Emirates is that it is very complex when it comes to regulations. And each emirate works a little bit differently. But definitely you have law firms set up in all of the Emirates. And those are, licensed to practice law. So it's a different process. It's very expensive, actually, to have a law firm in the United Arab Emirates, whether you're licensed in Dubai, whether you're licensed in one of the other Emirates. It's very different from here, where we as lawyers practice law through entities, and the entities themselves are very easy to set up. It's our licensing, our personal licensing, which is what makes us legitimately, professional companies or professional limited liability companies. It works a little bit differently than that.
Well, I guess, the important thing to take away from this the part of our conversation is that you're licensed in multiple jurisdictions: Texas, New York, UK. You're a UK solicitor.
Yeah.
And then you worked as a legal consultant in the UAE and Dubai. And I just want to get out that you already said you could answer any Dubai focused or UAE focused legal questions, but we've also got Hari, your husband. Your husband Hari has an actual law firm in Dubai. He practices maritime law, but I'd imagine that he could help us with any question that required
Well, and he does a lot more than maritime law now. That's how he started, and now he does a lot of corporate disputes, arbitration. He's actually licensed. He's licensed, or he's qualified as an arbitrator. He sits on arbitration panels, and most of his work is within maritime and energy and offshore services, but he's actually an excellent corporate lawyer, and he does a lot of that, just kind of not as his, you come to find out that about him, and a lot of shareholder disputes. He's been involved in a lot of interesting shareholder disputes with all of the attendant issues. And so he and his firm really is now evolved into the equivalent of a full service law firm, apart from maybe an estates. Actually, Huddy himself can even do estates work. He's registered with the DIFC for that. And that's what happens in a small country like that. It's kind of it's interesting because there's no reason not to pursue expertise in all these different areas. It's not. Those areas of the law are a little bit simpler. It's a civilian system, and in a civilian system, answers to certain questions are actually a little more straightforward than having to pour through the common law on anything. And so actually there are complications from the structure of the country, but as an attorney, once you've passed a certain number of years of practice, you really can cover a lot of different areas.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, I think that that's good for us to know, and for our audience to know as well, that we do want to advertise you as somebody that has this expertise in international transactions. You're licensed to practice in multiple jurisdictions, and you've got resources all around the world, really. One
good thing about having a maritime attorney in your, on your team is the nature of maritime law is that you really do cultivate relationships with law firms everywhere in the world, because your clients have ships checking into ports everywhere and things happen. So it is quite funny. I usually can produce a referral to almost anyone, any country that a person might need. Somebody my husband knows directly. So I think that's what's fun about doing maritime work. Maritime, which is also energy and oil and gas is also that way.
Sure. Yeah. Maritime. I wonder, you maybe know this, what percentage is devoted to shipping oil and gas?
Of maritime work? I mean, I don't think you can distinguish them anymore, because, all of those oil rigs, those are considered vessels.
Okay.
Anything that's offshore is it may be anchored down to the seabed, but it floated there, and it's essentially an anchored ship.
That makes perfect sense when you think about it.
And depending on where it is, it may be in international waters, it may be in, there are various, I actually can't recall how you define all of these things. I think 200 miles is where international waters start off any coastline. So there's a natural overlap there. And of course, it's easy to forget, but everything that we have has probably been in a container on a ship.
Yeah, that's right. These monitors, this microphone, the camera, the light, everything probably.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to think that we can have everything done domestically. Lots of countries like to pursue that way of thinking. But I think at this point, it's highly unlikely that's ever going to be a realistic. So.
Well, we've been going on nearly 35 minutes now, Sarah. So with the goal of trying to make these a little shorter, maybe we can wrap things up here
Sure.
and, think about talking again in the future and maybe having Hari on. I think
let's
that
get
would be
Hari on here and get him to talk about
what
what he's doing. Yeah.
A real live UAE attorney. I think that'd be really interesting. We'll have to account for the time difference, but I think that'd be really great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll get it set up.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Roland. It's been so great to be your interviewee.
Yeah, we want to feature you. We want to tell people about all this incredible experience that you
Next
have,
time
Sarah,
it's my turn to interview you. No.
Okay. No, I mean, we both have a really great experience. We want people to know that we're really experts in this field, talking about alternative investments. We've worked on private deals of every size, including the largest ones. We wanted to emphasize that, particularly for Sarah today. And so we do have experience. We're practicing attorneys. I'm only licensed in Texas, but Sarah is licensed around the world. So
maybe we need to work on that, Roland.
Well, yeah, maybe I'll get licensed in some other jurisdiction that here in the U.S. somewhere. But anyway, why don't we go ahead and wind things up, Sarah?
Well, thanks for having me, Roland.
Oh, for sure. Thank you.
All right, shall we? So thanks, everyone, for joining us today on Alt Investing Made Easy. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and follow us.
And remember, everyone, take aim with your alternative investing strategies.
See you next time.